So another weekend in the Premier League is just about being on some more twists and turns at both ends of the table, and there were some massive results that have big implications in the title race, in the European spots and in the relegation fight. So I thought in this video I'll look at the three biggest winners and the three biggest losers. I thought the first big winners of the weekend were Newcastle, of course a decent win away from home at Chelsea. We know how poor Newcastle have been on the road this season, of course only 3 wins in the Premier League away from home before that game against Chelsea. And Chelsea, despite losing to PSG, have been in some decent form in the Premier League, of course that 4-1 away win to Aston Villa. So taking both them into consideration, you think it'd be an easy Chelsea win. Of course Anthony Gordon in the first half got the only goal of the match, and I think ahead of a trip to Barcelona it's a massive confidence boost for Newcastle. While we're on the topic of this game, we might as well speak about the first big losers, Chelsea, and I think that's a real big dent in terms of their Champions League hopes. Partly due to their own performances in the Champions League as well as other English clubs, there might not be a 5th place spot for the Champions League this season. So of course there's no safety net for 5th, you've got to get in the top 4 this season to guarantee it. And for Chelsea, realistically, like I mentioned, it's a game they should be winning. With the amount of money that Chelsea spent, I think there'll be real pressure on Limousine if there isn't Champions League football next season at the Bridge. Because of course Champions League football is a big draw for some of these younger players, so they're not going to be able to sign as many players. I could make a whole separate video about this, about their recruitment, because I think it is quite stupid at times. If you want to see me make a video on that, let me know, but overall it's a big blow for Chelsea. Once again, my next winner and loser are both in one, West Ham and Manchester City. Of course, starting off with the home team, West Ham, of course, they're the winners of that match. Because I'm sure when all the analysts are looking at the games, you'd think they'd write that one off in terms of getting no points. And same can be said about other clubs looking at their fixtures, thinking this isn't going to be a game that West Ham get a point from. And I've got to say they were absolutely resilient at the back, especially Mavropanos, what a defender. And I've got to say they were well worth that point. Of course, they didn't do too much attacking, but the defending was top notch. And it takes me on to Man City, of course, because you've got to be winning games like that in this title race. Of course, Arsenal won earlier in the day to put that pressure on Man City. It shows whether they're contenders or pretenders. And it was quite a poor display from Man City. Of course, it was lacklustre with the finishing. And especially Haaland, he's been off the boil for a while now. Of course, only about 3 or 4 goals since the turn of the year. And I think that just about writes him out of the title race, of course, which takes me on to the next point, which is Arsenal. Of course, I've picked Arsenal as my third big winner. Of course, that could be the weekend that seals the title for them. And what a moment for young 16-year-old McDavid, the youngest ever Premier League goal scorer. I mean, imagine doing that at 16. When I was 16, it was lockdown, I was playing GTA. And of course, it just feels like one of the moments where they've just sealed the title there and then. And then, of course, for Man City to go away and get a point at West Ham, not all 3, is just massive for them. And of course, these types of teams that win the title, sometimes they have struggling games like they did against Everton, but they get them goals in the end to win the game. And Arsenal did exactly that in injury time, picking up 2, including that Max Darwin goal. And my final losers for the weekend, I've gone for Nottingham Forest. Of course, they picked up a point, they didn't lose, but the only trouble is that every other relegation team picked up a point as well. And I think when you look at the fixtures, of course, Tottenham had Liverpool away, West Ham and Man City at home, you've got to be winning that game against Fulham to get that lead. Because I've looked at this game at home against Fulham to try and get that advantage against the other teams relegation threatened. Because in a weekend where all the relegation teams picked up the same amount of points, it just feels like it's a missed opportunity for Forest. Of course, they had that tight offside ruled out, and then of course they had some good chances to win the match. But of course, like all season, they'd be struggling with the finishing, they didn't capitalise on a brilliant opportunity.